What if everything you thought you knew about paradise was a lie? What if the serene, ancient land you pictured was boiling with a fury you never imagined? In the heart of the Himalayas, a generation is rising, and they just set their own parliament ablaze. This isn't just news, it's a warning. What could the world's tallest mountains possibly have to do with an inferno of rage? For centuries, the Himalayas have been a symbol of calm, of spiritual solitude. They are the breathtaking backdrop to a nation known for its ancient monasteries, its intricate temples, and a culture that feels as timeless as the snow on its peaks. For millions around the world, Nepal is a place of pilgrimage, a sanctuary of peace. But underneath this idyllic postcard, something was shifting. For Nepal's generals, the Himalayas were not just a view. They were a boundary, a line between a past that revered tradition and a future that felt increasingly out of reach. They were living in a paradox, born into a world of smartphones and global news feeds, yet trapped in a political system rooted in the past. They saw a horizon filled with corruption, with limited opportunities, with promises that felt like whispers in the wind. This generation watched their peers in New York, in London, in Seoul marching for change. They learned to speak a new language, not just in words, but in hashtags and viral videos. They built their own spaces, their own communities, a kind of digital parliament, a virtual gathering place where every voice finally mattered. The pressure built slowly, like a tectonic plate shifting beneath a quiet landscape. The murmurs of discontent grew into a low rumble. Then, the government did something unexpected. They ripped out the wires. They flipped the switch on social media, silencing the one place where a generation had found its collective voice. In a single moment, the digital ground this generation stood on vanished. It was a final, critical error. The government saw their online frustration as a nuisance. They didn't realize it was the only pressure valve holding back a decade of pent-up rage. By sealing it, they turned a digital movement into a physical one. They transformed whispers into shouts, frustration into fire. And so, this leads us to a new, urgent question. Can you truly silence a generation? Or do you simply force them to speak in a louder, more dangerous language? And when their voices were cut off, frustration finally spilled over. Silence didn't calm the storm, it unleashed it. That single act was the final, critical error, the last straw. When the digital ground vanished, the protests had no choice but to pour into the streets. What began as a scattered online resistance now fused into a physical force. The city of Kathmandu, once a quiet tapestry of temples and markets, suddenly became the epicenter of a raging storm. The peaceful chants turned into a deafening roar, as a sea of people, mostly young, surged toward the symbols of their discontent. At the very heart of that storm stood the parliament building. This wasn't just another government office. It was a monument to the democracy their parents had fought and bled for. But to this new generation, it had become something else. A tomb for their hopes. Here, in a moment of unfiltered rage, a small and furious group broke through the barricades. Flames erupted, devouring not just the building, but the very last threads of a generation's faith in the system that had betrayed them. But the fury did not stop there. The violence spread like wildfire. The Prime Minister's official residence was targeted. Its ornate gates and ancient walls were no match for the desperation of the crowd. Nearby ministries and government offices also fell to the fire. This was no longer just a riot. It was a deliberate act of rebellion against institutions they saw as corrupt and unresponsive. The tragedy reached its horrifying peak with the fate of the former Prime Minister's wife, once a symbol of dignity and tradition. At first, it was only whispers, then came confirmation. She was reportedly trapped inside one of the burning government buildings, an agonizing and tragic victim of the chaos. Her death, a personal calamity amid collective rage, stood as a chilling reminder. A reminder of how quickly protest can spiral into unforgiving violence. As the city burned, the man at the top, the Prime Minister, could only watch the chaos from a safe distance. He was forced to flee his residence, not by motorcade, but by helicopter, lifted out of the inferno below. His escape was a powerful, public display of a government completely overwhelmed. And soon after, from the safety of a secluded location, he announced his resignation, a final concession to a force he could no longer control. It was a victory for the people, But the cost was staggering. This was no longer just a protest. It was a message, a scream of rage. If you will not hear our words, you will see our fire. And the world wasn't just watching. It was beginning to wonder what would rise from the ashes. The flames have been extinguished. The ashes remain. But in the smoke of that fire, the government struck back with a wave of crackdowns. Hundreds were arrested. A strict curfew was enforced. The army took control of the streets. The same young people who had poured into the streets with such hope now faced a brutal question. Had their uprising created change? Or had it only provoked the government into tightening its grip even further? That question hangs in the air. Heavy, uncertain. But here lies a fundamental truth. You cannot arrest an idea. You cannot extinguish a fire once it spreads to an entire generation. This uprising was never about a single political party. It was about something deeper. A sense of betrayal, a frustration with an old system too rigid, too outdated, to adapt to a new world. Nepal's Gen Z delivered a powerful message. Their voices will not be silenced. They are not just passive consumers of history. They are the writers of their own future. So where does Nepal go from here? Will this be the spark for real reform? Will the new government finally listen to the voices of its youth? Or will they repeat the mistakes of their predecessors? Perhaps this moment will stand as just another scar on the country's long, turbulent path. The answer has yet to be written. But one thing is certain. Nepal's youth have burned a bridge, and they have no intention of turning back. What do you think this uprising means for the future of Nepal? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you'd like to see more stories like this, consider subscribing.